Welcome and thank you for making the time to do this tasting. And it'll leave you with the best part of 4 wonderful bottles for the rest of this evening and the weekend, which I think is perfect. Exactly as Colette said, it's the end of our sort of celebration of International Women's Day, which obviously was last Monday. I obviously had to insist that I hosted this tasting with Sophie and Christina because it's 2 estates that I absolutely adore and wanted to do that. We have hundreds of brilliant women within the company, so it's quite a battle to be allowed to do it. But thank you to them for allowing that. Also, because Riesling is I think my desert. Well, I don't think I know my sort of desert island white grape variety, and the white grape variety which I own more of myself than any other. And I think arguably the one that portrays individual terroirs and sites probably better than any other. Maybe Chardonnay gives it a run, but Chardonnay can sort of does the same kind of job almost anywhere. And I think Riesling really shows the soils. So there we go. I'm not going to say a massive amount because I will introduce Sophie in a minute. But the 2 estates also have a lot in common, I think, because of being family run, being historic, but also having a modern approach. I mean, both are. One is considerably older than Corny and Barrow, and the other is about the same age. And also being completely quality orientated. So we've been delighted. Both are relatively new relationships for us in terms of supplying the wines, but actually ones which is always a good sign, feel like we've worked with for years and years. In the case of Christmann, it was 2 vintages ago, and in the case of Tarnish, it was a 2016 vintage. So the 19 vintage was our 4th. So those are great. And they both have, which I'm sure Christina and Sophie will talk about a little bit, very iconic vineyards, which I think is often the key to a great estate. Idig in the case of Christmann and the Doctor vineyard in the case of Tarnish. So that's very exciting when you have a really iconic, almost monopole in both cases. But that's enough from me. I will pass over to Sophie. I'll say a little bit about how we came across the relationships a little bit later, because there's always a nice story to that. But with the Pfalz Riesling, Sophie, thank you very much, and Christina, welcome too.
Yeah, thanks, Will, for the introduction. Hi, I'm Sophie Christmann. I'm the 8th generation working in our family estate in Pfalz now. I talk a little bit about the winery and the area, and then we can move on to the Riesling. We are situated in Pfalz, which is one of the southernmost wine-growing regions in Germany. We are only 30 minutes drive away from the French border, so it's pretty south. So in general, it's a little bit warmer, and we're also, I think, one of the most traditional wine-growing regions for dry Riesling. And that's something that is also the specialty of our estate. As Will said, we're a family-run winery. I'm working here with my father and my grandfather at the moment. My grandfather's not really working anymore, but he's still part of every team meeting every morning. Here you can see how the area looks. Like it's pretty close to the Pfälzer Wald, the Palatine Forest. But in general, everything's pretty soft here. Like we don't have steep hills. We have just like little hills. And here you can also see on the map where our winery is. Like as I said, on the left you can see Pfalz, and we are right in the middle of the area, which is where the vineyards are mostly on sandstone soils. And we are working with 20 hectares at the moment, which is a pretty normal size for a family winery here in this area. Mostly Riesling, but also more and more Pinot Noir at the moment. And I hope you're enjoying the 2018 Pfalz Riesling now, which is for us like our business card. Like our estate Riesling is something that like it's called our basic Riesling, but for us it should show everything that what Christmann stands for. Like it's made exactly like all our other wines. So it's only made from grapes that we grow in our own vineyards. It's hand picked. It's fermented spontaneously. Here you can see my father, who's Not always, but very often checking the grapes that we get in. And yeah, it ferments spontaneously, mostly in big wooden casks. And it also stems from vineyards which have a pretty good quality. Like our family vineyards have like 93% of our vineyards are classified Erste and Große Lage. So it's pretty high vineyard quality in general. So our estate Riesling is mostly made from younger wines or the first round of pickings in one of our single vineyard sites. And 2018 was a little bit warmer year. But with our big team of pickers and a very early start into harvest, we managed to make a very light and fresh style of Riesling that always has the nice juiciness that is typical for Pfalz, I think. And yeah, that's something that we're really happy with.
Sophie, how much do you find the vintages vary for you as a region?
Like, I think what varies is the challenge for us as wine growers and like the things that you have to react to, because it's getting warmer, but it's not that we have like only warm vintages anymore. Like we also get rain, we also get cool years, and so it gets more difficult to react as a wine grower. But I think at the end, in the style of the wine, the vintage don't vary so much anymore because we got way better to in handling those warmer years, because we I think in the past years we really learned to have that we need a big team of pickers because we have to be quick and we have to be ready to start early. Like for example in 2012, which was my first harvest here at home as an intern almost, and we were picking for almost 6 weeks. And this year we finished all the 20 hectares in 15 harvest days. And that's what's changing. But like that, we managed to keep the style. Like some years have a little bit more acidity, some years a little bit less. But I think that's the biggest change that we have. Like in general, I think the styles, does not vary too much.
Okay, yeah, good. And how long would you expect? And you choose to have this in screw cap, which I'm sure someone was going to ask about. I noticed both, which is great. Both of the wines, one is screw cap, one is cork. It's just because it's designed ready to go?
Yeah, it's not designed to be finished in a year or something like that. I really like our estate Riesling to have it like over 4 or 5 years because I think it develops really nicely. But we feel that the screw cap is fine for a wine that you don't store like longer than 5 years. If you store it longer, then we feel that the wine needs a cork because it needs the air. But yeah, on this quality level, we're fine with the screw cap. Also because the wine, it keeps the wine a little bit fresher.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. I just love the sort of slaty minerality of it as well. But it has a generosity, which
Yeah, but I think that's exactly what is typical for a modern style of Pfalz. Like Pfalz is always it's always juicy. It always makes you like you have a sip and you want another sip, and that's Pfalz. And because it always have it can be fruity. It does not have any residual sugar, like it's below 1 gram. But it doesn't need it because especially in the warm year, Pfalz is always soft. There's enough fruit in the wine. And so we try to keep it on a fresh and light style. And then it has like really nice balance.
Do you find, and Christina as well, but do you find there is an increasing interest because the alcohol levels in general terms are more moderate than has become usual in increasingly in a lot of white wine? Well, red wine too, but do you find it's a positive point for you?
I think like in general, like we aim to make the best style of wine and the best quality. And like we are happy if the alcohol levels are not too high, but in general, they are just what followed our feelings on the date of picking. Because especially during warm harvest and due to less acidity in warm summers, we started to pick earlier, which led to lower alcohol levels. But and that's something that I think is nice, because I I don't need so much alcohol in the wine, but if I could achieve better quality with 12.5, I'd never try to go for 11. So
yeah, okay, so it's a byproduct of going for quality. It just in the same way that you see some vintages in Bordeaux can be 15 and a half and still be balanced. It's
exactly.
And could you say a little bit about you mentioned about Erste Lage and GG and things. Could you, Grosse Gewächs, could you talk a little bit about the tiering for your wines in the Pfalz?
Yes, of course. Like we have many, like due to our very old vineyard classification, we have in Pfalz, we have many small sites, so it's pretty much like in Burgundy. We have usually, like you have in every village, like 1 or 2 Grand Cru vineyards, and exactly as in Burgundy, the Erste Lage vineyards, the Premier Crus, are situated around the Grand Cru vineyard, and we just call them German Großes Gewächs and Erstes Gewächs. So it's just a German translation, and the system works pretty similar. And for us, we have many classified sites in our winery, mostly in Gimmeldinger and Königsbach. But in Pfalz we have those Grand Crus and Premier Crus, Großes Gewächs and Erstes Gewächs, and then just as in Burgundy we also have Village, which we call Ortswein, and then we have the regional wines that we call Pfalz. So it's if you stay on the dry side as we do it, it's pretty easy here. And that's something that you can also always find on the capsule.
So we have Gutswein with the blue and Erste Lage. Yeah.
Exactly.
So do you want to say a little bit about the Erste Lage, or the Gimmeldinger?
Sure. Kapellenberg is it's made from a vineyard from the village where our winery is situated. Gimmelding is even though Pfalz is a rather warm area, the village Gimmelding and Königsbach, where our vineyards are situated, are a little bit cooler. Like I always call them cool climate, which is something that my father always loves about. But that's also the reason why we are not this the very traditional old famous part of Pfalz is Ruppertsberg, Deidesheim, Forst, like those villages that are a little bit warmer. For us, this was an advantage in the past years that it is a little bit cooler in Gimmelding and Königsbach. Especially in Gimmelding, like the village is situated at the end of a valley in the Palatine Forest, so we get lots of cold wind during the night. It's we can never sit really long in our garden because it just gets too cold, and that's something that is we always have to go to Deidesheim to sit outside in restaurants because it's warmer.
Okay. Yeah. And that's only what, 15, 20 minutes, isn't it?
No, it's 5 minutes. It's really
okay, yeah.
But it's just about the valleys. Like if you have a valley in the forest, you get the air, and if you don't have it, then it's protected and it stays warmer. And so in Gimmelding, it's about during the night, it's about 3 degrees cooler than it is in Deidesheim. So it's a pretty big difference for being so close together. And our Riesling vineyards are right in the end of this valley. So they are also in the cooler part of Gimmelding. And the soils, and here it is exactly as I described it with the vineyard classifications. It is a little hill. And on the top layers, we've got sandstone and loam. And in the basic layers, there's also a little bit of limestone. And there where the limestone is, there's our GG vineyard Meerspinne. That's where we make the Großes Gewächs. And then the part that is a little bit above it, which has a bit more sandstone and not so much limestone, that's where the Kapellenberg grows. And so for me, it's a very typical wine from this village because also 2014 was a rather cool vintage. It was not as cold as 2013, but it was rather cool. And so in general, it's a Riesling from a coolish year and from a coolish place. We've also had a Riesling from Deidesheim from the same vintage a few years ago. That's always very rounder. Gimmelding is always rather slim, rather herby, a bit more salty. And that's what Kapellenberg always is. Yeah.
And what sort of age? Obviously, it'll depend on the style of the vintage. But what sort of ageability do you find in wines like this? I mean, would you, if you had a case of the 14, would you have had 2 or 3 bottles and you'd be halfway through the case by this sort of age? Or
I think since I'm a wine grower, I'm always curious about a young wine, because I think but I think that's a very technical approach, because if a wine is very young, it tells you more about how it was made. And so I always have 1 bottle of the case right when I get it, because I'm interested in it. Yeah. And but apart from that, we feel that 2014 is just starting to be very nice at the moment. 15 is still a little bit more closed. So I'd say I might have, I think I would have had this 1 bottle right when I got it, and then I'd start to drink it now. But now you can drink it over another 10 years. So there's no hurry yet.
Of course, yeah, and I understand exactly what you mean. As a wine merchant, we're used to drinking so many young wines and tasting so many young wines, but it's why people should always buy 2 cases and drink one when it's young and one when it's older. I mean, it's simple. It's very simple. Brilliant. And what sort of food and when do you tend to drink your wines? I mean, I think there can be a lot of perception sometimes that Riesling is an aperitif wine or leading into the beginning of meals. What sort of things would you pair with things like the Kapellenberg?
We pair Riesling with almost everything. The estate Riesling is something that we have before dinner or on a warm summer day for a barbecue or something like that. But a riper Riesling, from a cooler year is something that we pair with maybe with a heavier fish dish. And Rieslings from warmer years are also something that, a ripe Riesling from a warmer year, for example, a 2012 Edict or something, is something that also goes great with meat. As long as it's not too dark, we always love Riesling with also with chicken, and that's also something that works quite well, or with veal, is it? I think a young cow.
A veal, yeah.
And those are things that we love with Riesling, because it always adds a little bit freshness. It's just with I usually don't pair it with the steak, but I think that's about the only thing that we don't eat with the Riesling.
And good with cheese as well, I imagine.
Yes, of course. But I think with cheese, it's I always like also sweet wines with cheese. So that's maybe more a topic for Christina.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, look, that's a perfect sort of segue. I'm sure we'll have got some more questions coming in, which we can pick up a little bit more as we go along. But it would be wonderful now to move. Well, first I can say from one beautiful wine region to another, and the Pfalz is stunning. The Mosel, I would argue, is maybe one of the wine world's most beautiful places, and Bernkasteler is, I think, a little bit like a sort of German equivalent of somewhere as gorgeous to be as Saint-Emilion. It sort of would strike, and I know at least 2 of our guests here know Saint-Emilion really rather well, and we're very involved in us getting the agency for Christmann, so that's a nice segue as well. But Christina, welcome, and if we move on to the estate Riesling from Tarnish.
Hello, everybody.
2017. Yeah, say a little bit about the wines.
Thank you for introducing. So my name is Christina from the Weingut Witwe Dr. Tarnisch. So it's a complicated name. We are in the Mosel region, so we are about 2 hours away from Sophie, so a little bit more on the western part. Yeah, you can see it on the map. So the Mosel Valley is just in the western part of Germany. It's quite close to Luxembourg. So 1 hour to Luxembourg, 4 hours to Paris, and 2 hours to Frankfurt. So really on the western part of Germany. It's one of the oldest wine growing regions. So over 2,000 years, wine growing is really popular in this region. We are really historical winery as well. So we are founded in 1636. So I'm the 12th generation in the family. And our winery name is Witwe Dr. Tarnisch. So the WWE on the label, you can see it. That's a short term for widow. So the widow of Dr. Hugo Thanisch. When my great-grandfather died in 1895, his wife took over with 29 and 3 children. And that was really unusual in that time that a woman leaded a winery. And so she really worked in a man's domain and was really successful with the winery. And so she always passed it to the woman. So since 4 generations, so my mom is a 4th generation in a row, a woman leading our winery, and I would be the 5th. So we are like a female estate. So a lot of history and the female history as well. Brilliant. Yeah, and so my great-grandmother was founding member of the VDP as well. So like Christmann, we are in the VDP as well. So we have the eagle on the capsule. Yeah, and so that was in 1910. And so since then, we are member. Yeah, you can see here a little bit of the vineyards. So we only do Riesling, so 100% Riesling. We do 9 hectares. So all our own fruit, so we don't buy any grapes. It's all, everything is hand-picked, and we have all vineyards only in this town. So in Bernkasteler is the town. We have vineyards on both sides of the river. So our winery is situated in Kues. On this side here are coming more the estate wines from, so what we are drinking now. And from the other side, so from Bernkasteler, we have all the single vineyards. So our Grand Cru, most famous vineyard is the Bernkasteler Doctor, which we can't taste today because it's really tiny production. So in total, it's only 3.2 hectares. So it's one of the smallest single vineyards in Germany. And we have a really special microclimate in the Bernkasteler Doctor and in the whole vineyards of Bernkasteler as well. We have slate soil, really steep vineyards in comparison to Pfalz. We are a little bit steeper. So in the Doctor vineyard, we are around 65 to 70% steepness, everything gray slate. And really, especially in the Doctor vineyard and in the single vineyards in Bernkasteler, we have really old vines as well, which really, the roots get really deep. So yeah, we have a lot of minerality and fruitiness in the wine from that. So really special microclimate. We are a little bit cooler as well because we're a little bit more northern. And so that's why we are getting really nice structure and balance in the wines between fruitiness and acidity. Here you can see the estate. So that's built from my great-grandfather in 1884. So it's just on the river. It's built from slate soil and sandstone. Yeah, and it's in the family since then. So we are sitting in the living room at the moment. And on the right-hand side, you see the sequoia. So that's a Californian tree. So when the house was built, it was a lot of international influences. So on the left-hand side, there used to be a Chinese pavilion. So the family really tried to get international fashion into the Mosel region. Yeah,
that's right. I find it most weird because I know exactly where you're. I know exactly where you're sitting on that picture. But yeah, no.
Yeah. So we have the Mosel right in front of us, and then the castle where the Doctor history is coming from. Yeah. So we are really in the center. Yeah.
Is it right to say that the Doctor vineyard, which is a Grosser Gewächs, is actually technically too small to be classified as one, but has special dispensation? It has it's an exception, but to be called a GG. The Doctor.
No, if we do a GG of it as well. So the dry wine is a GG, and if we are not fermenting dry, we use the predicates like Kabinett, Spatlese, and Auslese. So we are really still really traditional. So we're doing only 15% dry and the rest is off dry and a little bit more sweet. So both wines we are tasting today are not dry.
Yeah.
So we are a little higher from the sugar level, but we have a really good balance between fruitness and the acidity. So the first wine we have is off dry. So we are a little bit from the sugar, a little bit over the 9 grams of sugar. So you have a little bit more fruitness. That's really typical for Mosel and for the soil and the terroir. And then you have like a dryish finish. So it doesn't taste really sweet in the end because you always have the balance, and the minerality of the slate soil really give that saltiness and minerality in the end. So often also if you have a more sweeter wine, it doesn't stay really sweet on the palate because you always have the minerality notes. And so the estate Riesling we are tasting, so everything which is just under the Tarnish label, that's our entry level. That we have the first wine from Sophie as well. So that's coming from different vineyard sites, so not from one special site, so from 3 different vineyards, and is fermented spontaneously in stainless steel. And it's vintage 2017. So 17 was a really, really small and difficult vintage for us. So we had the half of the yield of 2016 because we had frost in end of April and then we had hail in August. So the yield was really, really small. Yeah. And that's why everything was really concentrated in the wine. So we had a really concentrated fruit and we have a really concentrated acidity as well. So that's why 17 is now really good because it just needed a little bit more time to balance because everything was a little bit, it just needed a little bit more time, and now it's really on a good balance to drink because the acidity in the first years was really hard and now it's getting a little bit softer. And so now it's a really good combination to the fruit we have.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. I mean, we always have Alison in our buying team who for years has always said people sometimes describe the Mosel wines or some of the other German Rieslings as well as being sweet or whatever. And actually it's more a matter of ripeness than sweetness. And I love this is such a flexible wine for food as well. I just know it is. And the kind of thing that just works, that slight off dry element to the nose and to the initial palate, but then as you say it cuts clean and cuts dry. You
have the fruit in the front, but then it doesn't stay, the fruitness doesn't stay on the palate, and that's why it makes fun to drink a bit or to take a bit more.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because it's a wine I also love for entertaining, and I love in Magnum. And someone mentioned earlier about the German bottles being inconvenient for sometimes for chilling. So I think what everyone should do is to take a German bottle and a German Magnum whenever they're buying a fridge, because if you can't chill a German bottle or a German Magnum, then don't buy the fridge. Would be my thing. But outside at Christmas, perfect for
that's a good hint.
The Magnums can be very big. I appreciate.
No, and so especially with the estate wines, it's just about drinking. So not to be complicated, you just need to open the bottle and drink it. It's perfect to sit on the terrace if you have a little bit higher temperatures and just enjoy it. And with light fruit dishes, it's really good as well.
Yeah, dangerously easy to drink. But it has this.
And we have 10.5 alcohol, so it's really enjoyable as well.
But I find both of the estate wines just so Moorish in a different way. You have the sort of the ripeness here, but you have exactly as Sophie said, the kind of salty Moorishness, like you might get slightly with a good Parmesan or whatever. It has that slightly crystalline, slightly salty, and I think Moorishness for me is one of the most important qualities in a wine. That as you put the glass down, you're sort of thinking, well, why am I putting it down? It's wonderful.
And that's about Riesling. So Riesling is really perfect to just drink and enjoy. So
absolutely brilliant. So should we go on to the Bernkasteler Badstube,
yes,
to the Spatlese.
yeah.
A category of wine that I feel is massively either slightly misunderstood or underappreciated.
Underrated sometimes as well.
Spatlese is a bit of a gem for me.
Yeah, so the first one we had was the entry level, and we have almost the same system like in the Pfalz, but we don't have the Erstes Gewächs, so we only do the estate wine, which we just tasted. Then we do a village wine as well. And then we have the single vineyards, so the Grand Cru vineyards. And all our single vineyards are situated in Bernkasteler. Yeah. So as I said, the Bernkasteler Doctor is my mom always calls it a filet mignon, so in the middle. And the Bernkasteler Badstube we are tasting now is just everything which is around. So it's also a really steep vineyard, also really fine slate. But in the Doctor, it's a little bit finer as well. So here, in comparison to the Bernkasteler Doctor, you just have a little bit more like the citrus and fruitic notes, and it's not as warm as the Bernkasteler Doctor, but still you have a lot of concentration and minerality. Yeah, here you can see the slate soil. So it's gray slate, so it really warms up in the night or in the day and gives all the warmth to the vines by night. So yeah, you get a really nice ripeness, but you have the coolness of the nights as well, because we are just, yeah, one of the most coolest regions in Germany. And that's why you're getting a really, really nice balance between fruit and acidity. Now we have a Spatlese. So from the picking time, it's a little bit riper in comparison to the Kabinett we had before. So you have from the grape by itself, you have a little bit more fruit or a little bit more ripeness. And now you have a wine which is fermented a little bit less than the off-dry one. So now we have a Spatlese. So we have a little bit more fruitness, but again, the acidity really balances the sweetness. And so it's really like a fruit you're tasting and not really like sweets. And this is really, really good for cheese because everything which is salty is perfectly with a Spatlese, especially if you have it a little bit older. So if you have a few years on the bottle, it's really nice for cheeses. And you can do it for all dishes which are a little bit more spicy or a little bit more salty. So for example, like a Thai curry, if you have a little bit more spiciness, it's fitting perfectly to the fruit and to the acidity and the saltiness in the wine. So there you always get a really nice pairing, but you can just have it by itself or like an aperitif as well. So it's also really easy to drink and to pair. Yeah, and in all the wines we have spontaneous fermentation, and all the single vineyards are fermented in wooden barrels. In the Mosel Valley, we use the typical barrel called Fuda, so that's 1,000 liters, and really, really old wood. So we don't want to have the new wooden taste in the wines. We just want the roundness and the complexity.
Okay, and because that's the same also for you, Sophie, with using. So talking about Riesling is never, well, to my knowledge, is never used with new oak. I can't ever remember tasting a Riesling with new oak because I think it would just be drowned. But what is it about using wood that helps bring out the most in old wood that helps bring out the most in Riesling, do you think?
Well, I think it's just very helpful for the wine to get a little bit of oxidation already in its early stages, because it just makes it a little bit rounder. It also helps it to open up a little bit more, and it also loses a little bit fruit. I think that's something that is also like Riesling made in a special way can be like very, very fruity. And that's something I think that like none of us really want. Like none of us wants the Rieslings to be like, especially a dry Riesling, like to have these like really peachy, exotic, tropical fruit flavors. And that's something that you usually get with the cold fermentation in stainless steel. And with a little bit warmer fermentation, that is also easier to achieve in a barrel, because you have a better isolation of the temperature. Okay. And that's something where also the barrel, like like the fermentation works a little bit better. It is a little bit warmer, and it also gets like especially a little bit of oxidation already in its early ripening stages. And that's something that usually makes a Riesling for us, like always, like we usually, like very often we have more juice than we can fit in a single barrel. And sometimes we do like little trials and put one part in a barrel and one part in a tank. And if you taste them blind, usually like almost always the barrel is better at the end. So I think it's like a mixture of different things that just makes it a little bit more interesting.
Okay. And I would imagine, and this might seem counterintuitive to people, but if wine sees some oxygen when it's made, it actually makes the wine more stable and more likely to age. Would you both agree?
Yeah, of course. Like if the wine, like I think it's like if you can, like if the wine does not learn to handle oxygen when it's young, it kind of gets afraid of it. And that's something like with the screw cap, you can work with no oxygen like in the making process, but especially if you put on the cork, then you have the wine has to get used to the oxygen. I think that's something that is very important.
Yes, and I think that happens with traditional Rioja and traditional wines from Piedmont, Barolo, etc. I think one of the reasons those wines age so well is that they are aged in big oak vessels and they do get used to that. But so one thing I always find with Riesling, and people might find this a bit strange, but I often find Riesling is one of the best grape varieties personally to decant or to show lots of air to in terms of serving into the glass. And very often I find Riesling, if I happen to have any left the following day, is even better the following day. So I think people often think Riesling, because it's a fine grape variety and can be very elegant, I find it almost one of the most robust grape varieties as well in terms of drinking from one day to the next and the way that that you approach it.
Yes, so especially in the first years, it's always like when I open a bottle, it's better on the next day, or I put it or I decant it and then put it back in the bottle just to give it a bit more air, and then just the aromas gets more open. So that's a really good thing, and you can really keep them open in the fridge as well. So sometimes we have it open in the fridge for 1 week and it doesn't taste old afterwards. It just opens. So that you can really store them really good in the fridge. If you don't have them in the door shaking, then it's all good.
And would you, between you, which would be interesting, to what sort of temperature would you serve would you serve the two estates wines at different temperatures or at quite a similar temperature, do you think?
I don't know what you're doing usually, but I would say you can do with the same temperatures.
Yeah, okay. Me too.
Now, we had a very good question from Al James. Very good to see you, Al. We used to play rugby together many, many years ago. And as you said, probably didn't expect to be doing a German tasting on Zoom on a Friday night. But do you get, as German producers, frustrated by seeing the prices of Bordeaux and Burgundy, shall we say, when the amount of effort that has to go into producing your wines is arguably even greater? And I know historically, if you go back 100 years, German wines, and particularly German wines from the Mosel, were often the most expensive wines on lists. And I think something of that has to do with the way that sweetness back then, and champagne was much sweeter. Champagne was prized as a very great asset. But do you feel that Germany is making strides in terms of its reputation in the wine world and its pricing?
But I think, like, for me, it's like I don't get frustrated about the prices. I get a little bit frustrated if people don't take the time to consider German wine. That's something that really annoys me. But I think that's something that, depending on the market we're talking about, is getting better and better, especially with Riesling, because I think the world has recognized now that Germany is the leading country in the production of Riesling. And Riesling is a variety that, especially with climate change and many other wine growing areas that get like really warm, that a German Riesling is something really nice and refreshing. And is something that you have to consider if you have a serious wine list in your restaurant. And that's something, yeah, where I really say, like, of course, German Riesling in its top level will get a bit more expensive. But on the other hand, I also wouldn't aim for the prices that we see in Bordeaux and Burgundy at the moment, because I'd always want people to be able to enjoy a bottle for Christmas. Like, they don't need to have it every day, but they should be able to afford it on Christmas. So I think like this crazy, and I also like, I want wine lovers to drink the wine. I don't like, I see how the market's developing and I find it very interesting. But in general, I think like German Riesling, it can and it must be a little bit more expensive for people to even consider it, because if things are too cheap, like I also like get suspicious if something is too cheap. So that's, I think, a more interesting point. Which price level is the best for German Riesling even being considered everywhere as a serious high quality product?
Yeah. Okay, and yeah, I completely agree. Although I do realize that Al has stitched up any price negotiations we might ever want to have in the future, but there we go. Christina, what would you say?
No, I totally agree what Sophie said. So we don't need to be frustrated for it, and we need to get a little bit more expensive again, but it should be affordable as well. So I think it's always like, it could be a little bit better, but if the Burgundy prices, I don't know if it should be our aim. We just need to do more focus on Riesling and show the people how great it is, and then it will develop by itself.
No, I agree. We've got a good question in as well about if, because this is one area where your two estates vary slightly. In terms that Tarnish, you're 100% Riesling. Is this something, I mean, global warming, I think, plays to the strengths of Riesling, but is being 100% Riesling something you would consider ever consider changing?
So for the moment, we are really convinced that Riesling is the best grape for our terroir and soil what we can do. So for the moment, we are keeping, but sure, you need to see the development. And I'm thinking about maybe planting some Pinot Noir as well. I think the climate and the quality could be there, but for the moment, we are so good with Riesling, so that's why I don't think we need to have Pinot Noir, because I still think that the other regions do it more better at the moment. And if it's getting a little bit warmer, we could think about it. It's the same like, why should I do a Pinot Gris when other regions can do it better? So we have the perfect slopes and the perfect soil for Riesling, and that's why we are keeping it. And we have so many different styles of Riesling when we do dry Riesling, off dry, and a little bit sweeter one. So we have so many types of it. So that's why I'm not missing another grape at the moment, because I can do so many different wines only with Riesling as well.
So you have diversity within Riesling, if you like. Yeah. And Sophie, you do work incredibly well, I have to say, with Pinot Noir, that is. So how is that different? I mean, for you, there are obviously places in Alsace where Riesling and Pinot Noir coexist, but in Burgundy, it's obviously Chardonnay and a bit of Aligoté alongside Pinot Noir. So Riesling alongside Pinot Noir is an interesting challenge. And how different is it producing the two?
Like, I think in general, like my answer is pretty much the same that Christina just gave, because I think like that you have to focus on what you can do best. And that's, for example, why we don't do any sweet wines, because that's something that Pfalz is not made for. It's too warm here, like the wines get too sweet. And I don't think that you have to do everything yourself. Like you can buy it from other great producers if you want to drink it. And so for us, it's Riesling and Pinot, because we have exceptional limestone soils, especially in Königsbach, but also in Gimmeldinger. That's something that not many people know about Pfalz, because Pfalz is this Riesling region with its sandstone soils. But in Edic, in Königsbach, and in the vineyards around it, we have like a very heavy tertiary limestone soil, and with a little bit of loam and clay, which is actually like, it's like, I almost don't dare to say it, but it's pretty similar to the soil of Musigny, for example, especially with the loam that you've got there. Like we just we're buying new Pinot wines from Burgundy for this year's planting, and the guy that sells them to us called because he has never seen so high levels of active limestone in the soils in Germany. So that's something that is like really special for those vineyards in Gimmeldingen and Königsbach. And that's why Pinot feels very natural for us here. And it's like it's been cultivated in Edic for more than 800 years. It's like my family has also done it for more than 100 years. And for me, it's also pretty similar in philosophy, because I think like a good Pinot should never impress by like a very heavy body and richness. For me, a Pinot is great when it's elegant, playful, but also has a lot of pressure. But it's always like, I always like it best when it's very elegant. And that's something that is the same with Riesling. Like if a Riesling gets too heavy, it's no fun. But if a Pinot gets too heavy, it's also no fun. So for me, it's like a very similar approach to those both varieties. And so for me, it feels very natural to do those two. But in general, it's the same for us. We also want to focus on what we can do best. And for us, that's Riesling and Pinot. Dry Riesling and Pinot.
Absolutely perfect. Now, there is a very predictable question in from a customer of mine who I actually refer to as Mr. Magnum sometimes, who you know, Sophie, Mr. Henry. What are the biggest formats that you bottle? And that's to both of you. And maybe more importantly, at what point, at what size does the bottle shape change?
Like our bottle always stays a Schlegel-like bottle, because we use sparkling bottles if we bottle very big bottles. So we use champagne bottles because they are a bit more similar to our shape. Hi Colin. We've bottled up to 15 liters so far, but we've never sold anything bigger than 6 liters. And that's also something that we only sell by request before bottling. But my father loves big bottles, and he's hoping for many big parties in the future. And so he always also bottles 9 and 15 liter bottles.
Okay, well, I think I've just received an email on that one, but there we go. That's very good. And Christina, what about
we
you?
only do magnums, so
okay. Bottles
double size, and we do the Schlegel bottle as well, so they are really huge.
Yeah, no, they're good fun. They're good fun, those. And so here's a good question for you, Christina. How long would the Bernkasteler Badstube 16 last in the cellar, do you think? I mean, okay, say last. When for your taste would it be at its optimum or at its very best for drinking, do you think?
So I would say optimum maybe in 5 years to get the really, really nice balance to drink, but you can keep it for 20 years or longer as well. So especially if you have a little bit more residual sugar in the wines, they can keep really, really good. So we have a lot of old bottles in our cellar as well. Yeah. So like 59 and older as well, and they develop great. And they are still really, really fresh. So it's always depending on the storage and on the vintage. But they are really made for storing as well. That's why we use the cork closure as well for everything in the single vineyards. just that you can keep them as well really good.
Okay. Yeah, no, I love the wines with age, but I do think that particularly in the Mosel, blind tasting older Rieslings is, I mean, well, I don't ever struggle in blind tastings to feel silly, but that you can confuse a Kabinett with an Auslese by getting the vintage and the age wrong. It's an absolute minefield of mistakes for me, anyway. Interesting question from Al again. Could Riesling do more with its signature kerosene petrol smell? Now, what is it about Riesling that has this signature kerosene? Is it a winemaking trait? Because he also mentions struck match, which is to do with reductive winemaking. Will Riesling always go to a slightly kerosene petrol orientated nose, or is it something you can actively avoid?
I think like if you taste, like if we taste our Rieslings, we don't really find those petrol notes. Like we think they develop in a way of like they get a little bit more like roasted nuts, honey, caramel. Like those are usually the aromas that I find them if I look at the nose. So I think in general, like if a Riesling is very good quality and very balanced, it will not get very heavy petrol notes. So I think it's also a little bit of a quality topic, because when a Riesling has made its first ripening step, and I think that's something that, for example, our Kapellenberg has done, it does not change so much anymore. Like it will be like it will age, but it will not make such a big step anymore. Like it will go smoother and slower. And so I think, I think that's, but it's pretty tough to define petrol notes. So like people talk about different things there.
No, I would totally agree. And Christina, is it more of a Mosel trait to have slight kerosene notes?
So we don't have it a lot as well. So it's some vintages have it a little bit, but it's changing with the age as well. So sometimes it's coming a little bit, and sometimes it's going away. But it's not in a lot of vintages we have as well.
Yeah. No, I think the wines have such elegance that to have kerosene to a degree is quite a clumsy flavor, and it's lovely not to find it in the wines, but it can be a signature, I guess, at times.
I think in general, like he was just specifying that he's not thinking it's a bad thing, and it's something that where I think like we're talking almost about the same thing, because it's like this like when it ripens, the aroma changes. It's not on the on those like very classical fruits. It gets like more maybe like also like dried apricots or things like that. But that's a change in style, and that's something that I really love in Riesling. Like when you do this step from the primary fruits to this little more ripe aromas.
Yeah, works absolutely brilliantly. And do we have any more questions? Because otherwise, I did want to say a little bit about the fact that how we came across and were lucky enough to work with both estates. In the case of Tarnish, we were actually put onto the wines in the first instance by Peter Sisek. So who many of you will know is of sort of Pingus, and then latterly Rocheron, and now working on sherry as well, fame. So that was brilliant, and he sort of messaged earlier today. So we thank him very much for that, because it's been a really, really fun relationship, and one we also extend into Asia, where obviously... And
we thank him too. So.
Good, well, I'm pleased. But he absolutely loves the wines. As interestingly, I would say when I ask or go and visit producers are all over the old world mostly, and who are mostly predominantly red wine producers, what they drink a lot of, and what grape variety they love, whether it's Roberto Conterno or Peter Sisek, etc. Riesling always comes very high. I think because of, like I was saying earlier, the fact that it portrays its situation and its vineyard site and its environment so very well. I think people who love wine not everyone who loves wine will always love Riesling, and that's fine because it has a personality, which is what you want. But it is such a common thread amongst those who do love wine that Riesling is a really diverse, evolving and lovely sort of medium for doing what wine is all about, which is sort of a sense of place and a sense of occasion, and drinking it, which is always the most important part. But then when it came to Christmann, Colin, who I've mentioned already, was on a trip that we do each year, and last year was the first year we didn't do it for all sorts of obvious reasons. But we came across Christmann on a Saturday morning, and both Sophie and Stefan, her father, gave us a couple of hours, and Stefan was even brave enough, or foolish enough, I might say, to join us for lunch. And after not managing to end the relationship there, which could have happened, we were very, very pleased to start representing the wines. And I think it's obvious across all four glasses why we're absolutely, delighted to work with both these estates and to have Riesling of this quality, but of its personality, and only 2 hours apart. You can spend 2 hours to drive from Pomerol or Santa Emilia on up to Santa Steph, and you won't necessarily see the same degree of difference that you see here. But let's see if there's one or two more questions in. So someone's disagreeing with me. That's good. That's always good. Disagree, Will. If someone loves wine, how can they not enjoy Riesling? Well, of course, absolutely. Do you think that the legacy assumptions of German wine in the UK impacts the popularity of Riesling? Interesting. There is always, or has been, a degree to which the likes of Black Tower and the like will have had an effect. But I think actually producing wines like these, and particularly under Screwcap, the estate wines, is changing people's opinion. And I love, and I think it's something that we can all do as wine lovers, to just pour friends glasses of Riesling, and estate Riesling in particular, and just give it to them as a wine. And don't ask them if they want Riesling. Just show them the wine, because they will love it. There are all sorts of snobbish assumptions about sweetness and dryness being better, etc. It's, I think, not good. But do you find that your Rieslings get used on tasting menus and things like that a lot, as if people are having lots of intricate courses, that sommeliers will work the wines into tasting menus, and that's a good way of introducing people?
I think it really depends on the country. I think the UK has been especially hard to forgive us on those bad sweet wines that we sold there back in the 80s and 90s. I think, like, in general, there are like many other countries that have been way more open for dry German Riesling. But that's something that is luckily changing now, and that's great. And I think that's also something that we have to be thankful to many great sommeliers that have started the job, but also to people like you that dare to try to sell also dry German Riesling, for example. Yeah.
No, I think where you're preaching to the converted here, because I think everyone here totally understands the gems that others are missing out on. But an interesting question I've just had, and I think directly to me, what outside, I think I probably know some of Sophie's answer to this, but Christina, maybe first. When you're drinking wines outside from outside Germany, where do you tend to go? What are your sort of favorite go-to regions?
So we do more like the old world as well. So we do more France and Italy, and I'm always trying the new world as well. But I like the classic style from France and Italy personally more than the new world. So I've been traveling to New Zealand as well for doing internships, and I really like the wines. But for really enjoying, I'm more like the old world type for drinking this kind of wines. I prefer.
Okay, and Sophie, where would be your desert island places?
I think it'd be a good Pinot from Burgundy.
Hard to beat at times.
Yeah.
Someone's asked, and this might be a different answer for both of you, but what's the biggest export market for Riesling? I mean, not for your estates really, rather than saying for Riesling generally, but I mean, where would you, where sells where? Well, where do your wines sell well? And maybe are there any markets that might surprise us that are particularly big?
Like for us, it's the Scandinavian market. So our biggest export market is Sweden, but Norway is also very important. But they mostly buy our estate Riesling. Quality-wise, Russia is actually one of our most important export markets. Because it's like pretty much the same as with you. In Russia, and that's I think also why we've been so successful at launching Christmann at the UK, because we've got a partner that is focusing on high quality and accepts that German Riesling can also be part of this high quality fine wine portfolio. Like in many other countries, like as a German producer, sometimes you just have, like for example in Spain, we have a German wine nerd who is trying to push people to drink German wine, which is way more complicated than having a partner that sells fine wines from all over the world and tells people, like, you like this Chardonnay, you should also try this Riesling. So it really depends on the partner. Also the US is also quite important, but not so much anymore because of the tariffs.
What would you say, Christina?
So for us, it used to be US. So we have really, really long tradition to export to the US. So before the First World War, we already exported to the US. And so in the 90s or in the 80s, we had 90% sale into the US. So almost the whole... all bottles went to the US, and now it's changing a little bit. It's depending on last year the tariffs as well. But my mom tried in the last years just to focus on more different markets. So Asia is a big market for us as well, and Europe is growing. So US is still a really big market for us, but not as it used to be.
Okay. No, interesting. I mean, I completely agree with what you were saying, Sophie, about it being part of, both of your estates should be part of, any real seller. Yeah, I mean, that's what I would say, is that it's a matter of, wine is a matter of diversity in terms of the styles of wines people should have, I think, definitely. And do you have any, I'll ask another very good question. He's on fire tonight. What are your views of Riesling from other regions, for Riesling outside of Germany? Are there places you feel are more promising than others?
I think, like, I spent one harvest in the Clare Valley. I worked with Jeff Grosset.
Okay.
Which is, I think one of the most famous Riesling growers of Australia. I think they make great Riesling, but it's like really different. So that's what I'd say to all of these regions. With Clare Valley and Wachau, it's very easy for us to understand that it's different because the climate is so different. Alsace is something that we have a bit mixed feelings with Alsace, because they are so close for us. Like, it's all only like, it's not an hour that it takes to drive to Trimbach or Zint Humbrecht or to those big domains. The climate and the terroir is pretty similar. But in general, their wine growing approach is a bit more traditional. So the wines are usually a bit heavier, a bit rounder, a bit warmer. What is really interesting is that like wine growers from Alsace are starting to look at Germany. They are starting to visit. They are starting to talk to us, because they see that they are not as successful with their Rieslings as Germans are. I think it's been pretty tough for the French people to understand that they might have to look to Germans in wine growing questions. But that's something But I think that is a very promising region that is changing a lot. Like, there are young wine growers doing great things now. So I think this region will also be moving a bit quicker in the next years.
What would you say, Christina?
And in general, I think it's really nice to have Riesling in so different ways. Like you have it's one grape and it's tasting so different, and you can from each region it's different. So you can really taste the heritage and the winemaking and the difference. Like Sophie said, from Elsass to Germany, you have the same climate, but everybody has his own thinking of how to produce Riesling, and that's what the grape makes so interesting, that you have so many different types of Riesling. Is it like the winemaking more wood or more stainless steel, or is it in the vineyard, or is it like dry or off dry? So there are so many ways where you can produce perfect Rieslings, and that's what it makes the grapes so interesting.
Last couple of questions, because then we will let people eat, and particularly you guys, because you're an hour ahead of us, so you're probably starving. But do Germans enjoy Riesling enough? Does the German public support Riesling?
Like, I think Germans drink way too much Grauburgunder and Weißburgunder. So that's, but in general, I think it's okay. I think there are still some people that are afraid of those Rieslings with lots of acidity that they remember from their childhood that don't really exist anymore. But I think in general, I think Germans in general are not a very self-confident country if they look at their own products. So Germans also drink lots of other wines.
But in my feeling, it's changing a little bit, especially when I see last year when a lot of Germans went to Mosel for their holidays. It was like when they're having a Riesling, it was like, oh, it really tastes really, really good. And I think it's coming. It's a development, but the Germans are more focusing on the regional products now. And especially in the Mosel Valley, Riesling is just one of the most important grapes. And I think it's coming. So especially a lot of young people came to Mosel last year, and they really loved Riesling. And so I think it's more and more coming, but sure, Grauburgunder and Weißburgunder is really famous as well.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I mean, look, I think it's been a wonderful evening, and I think it's great to hear that the Germans are going back to supporting the wines a little bit more, because I think that's key. But I would just like to sort of thank you both for being here. I think it's been an absolutely very impressively sort of good tasting to go through the wines. I love Riesling. I think everyone here does, which is why they're here, and it's wonderful to see this. I think I'll ask one last question about, it seems to be every MW and sommelier's favorite grape to a degree. And I think that's true. But I think it's a matter of us merchants and you are evangelistic customers, putting the wines in front of people and just showing them the quality that is out there, the diversity of wine styles. I think it's down to us all. I think the wines speak for themselves, and it's down to merchants and restaurants to really support them. So with that, I would like to thank you both very much. Wish you a very good Riesling day tomorrow, a very happy weekend. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the wines over the next couple of days. I can't stress how much it is worth following these wines. Put them in the fridge overnight and then try them for lunch tomorrow, dinner tomorrow, lunch Sunday, dinner Sunday. But keep following them. And thank you both. Take care. Lots of love to your families.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Will, for moderating.
Take care.